How's it going, everybody? We're here to encourage you on the Encouragement Conquers All podcast. We want to help to encourage you in 6 areas of your life: in your physical fitness, in your mental life, in your social life, your giving back, the way you're philanthropic, on how you help others with your time, your talents, your gifts. We want to help you to be able to help in your faith life, as well as in your career and your finances. I mean, these are 6 areas that can help anybody be encouraged, but each area provides a different way for you to really cultivate the whole person. We right now in this world have to be people that aren't afraid to challenge ourselves to design our life. If we don't design our life, we can't change our life. If we don't design our life, we can't help to be the greatest encouragement in every person that meets us. Well, we have another great guest on this week at the Encouragement Conquers All podcast. It's the most encouragement podcast in the world. We are going to encourage you today through the guest of honor today. He's from the UK. You're going to love his accent. He's Simon Hartley. He's a renowned psychologist, consultant, and also a performance coach with over 25 years of experience in elite and professional coaching. Simon illustrates so much of how a team can come together and how sport disciplines, including football, rugby, cricket, and motor racing. Man, I'll tell you what, cricket, I never played cricket. I want to get Simon to get me out to the UK to play some cricket here. I played rugby in college. People don't know that. I played for 4 years. I was the scrum half and the outside center. I had a blast. But Simon is the author of 10 books, including Stronger Together, How Great Teams Work and Hire Great People. Simon is a leading authority on team dynamics, performance enhancement, and talent development. His expertise extends beyond the realm of sports, as he has successfully applied the principles of sports psychology to business, education, healthcare, and charity sector. Through his award-winning international speaking engagements, Simon shares invaluable insights on building high-performance teams, enhancing individual and collective performance, and fostering a culture of excellence. Join us as we delve into Simon's wealth of knowledge and experience, exploring the intersection of sports psychology, leadership, and organizational success. Come on, let's get this guy on here to encourage somebody. All right, Simon. Hey, Simon, look, what are you laughing at there? You're already laughing, Simon. Laughter's a great encouragement source,
isn't it? Yeah,
it is.
Yeah. I've one of the things I've noticed about really, really high performers is they tend to love what they do, and they tend to laugh a lot. One of the teams that I've been working with recently, they're a rugby team from Fiji, and we know that if they're not laughing, they're not going to perform.
I love rugby.
Yeah,
it's a great sport.
Yeah,
it's a great team sport. I had one of the best times my 4 years playing rugby. They used to call me Moses.
Moses.
Yeah, because I would do these because I was one of the smaller players, and I would do these wild things how did you do that? And I'd say only through the big dog, only through the big dog.
You can see players for me.
Yeah, design some plays. Tell me about your journey. You've been doing this for a long time, over 25 years.
Yeah. I started working with elite sports players and athletes whilst I was still at university. So I left university, and by the time I'd left university, I'd already worked in international cricket. I'd worked with professional rugby, and then I went out into the world to do what I do. Ended up working a lot in soccer, also motorsports, as you said. Yeah, a vast amount. And in the Olympic programs, there's a huge amount of sports. So I describe it as everything from archery to weightlifting in the alphabetical spectrum.
Yeah, and I'm a coach, and I work with a lot of young people. What do you've written a lot of books on teamwork. How do you bring a team together? What are the first things to start with?
It's often described as a common goal, but I think it's more than that. I actually describe it as a strong, clear, shared purpose. Because a goal is fine. A goal's a target. Most teams have got targets. When I work with sports teams, typically if I walk into their dressing rooms and I say, what do you want to achieve? They'll say, well, we want to win. We want the trophy. We want the championship, the gold medal, whatever it is. And then the reflection is, what if I walked into the opposition's dressing room? What would they say? Oh, they'll also say they want to win. Okay, they want to win the championship too. They want to win the gold medal. Okay, so what makes us different? And if it's only a goal, it's not particularly strong. It's got to be more than that. So when I say a strong, clear, shared purpose, it's not just what we want to achieve, it's why. It's why it matters to us, why we care about this, why we're going to give more than the other guys are going to give. That's what we really need to understand.
And so, what are some of the best cultures? You're talking about culture, the why. On our team, Team Amazing. So we have young, in youth sports, and we want to be the most encouragement team, encouraging team we can be. So win or lose, we're going to bring encouragement to every person on the floor. Even the ref will encourage the ref. Hey, great call, or even if they have a bad call, hey, that's all right. I forgive you. It's all right. So, what are some of the best, from your team, good examples of teams that you're like, man, they had an unbelievable purpose, and this is why?
Yeah, well, not only do they all want to achieve it, but they want to achieve it together. This is a huge element of what makes teams work. They feel a real sense of belonging to what they do, and they understand that they probably can't achieve what they want to on their own. Now, this is equally true for those people that most of us would describe as an individual athlete. So a track and field athlete who runs around the track on their own, or a swimmer who goes up and down the lanes in a pool on their own, they also understand that they're part of a team, and that their team usually includes their coaches, their physiotherapists, their athletic trainers, the strength and conditioning team, sports science crew, and their family usually, and significant people in their life. All of those people are part of their team. They do not operate on their own, and they cannot succeed on their own either. So they understand that they're critically a part of a team. So they belong to something, and I think that sense of belonging is massive.
Yeah, and do you have any examples of teams that you've worked with that you're like, man, I really was impacted by this particular team?
Yeah, well, one that I've been working with very recently are the rugby sevens team from Fiji. They have an incredible sense of belonging, and I kind of often described that they've got some dimensions that most teams don't have. So most sports teams, they will train together, they will probably travel together, they'll eat together, but the Fiji team also worship together and they
Wow.
sing together.
Do you
Um,
think that changes it when they worship together? How does that change the dynamics of the team?
yeah, it gives them a level of belonging that most of the other teams haven't got. They sing together, they worship together, they pray together, and that pulls them together as a unit. It gives them a common way of understanding the world, and their world, and a common a way of understanding each other as well.
Yeah, Steph Curry, he has a Bible study that he invites, I can't imagine this, but if you know sport, I don't know if you know basketball, like Draymond Green, who's like a big character in the NBA,
Mhm.
he goes to it, and he would have a lot of the players go to it. And I think you can see in the Warriors, and for American basketball, you can just see them come together in a different way that enhances their performance through the roof. I love it. Do you come from a faith background there, Simon?
Um, I've had a kind of a weird journey through that.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
went from being brought up in a faith-based family to really questioning it,
Yeah.
and then rediscovering spirituality through actually working with teams like the Fijians,
Oh,
um,
wow.
and understanding that there's a dimension to life that you can't boil down to numbers, you can't quantify, you can't scientifically measure. There's a dimension to life that we have to kind of embrace through our spirit. You can't just embrace it through your mind. It's more than that.
Well, that's beautiful to hear. And I think that people need to be more open to that,
Mm.
taking chances. And, those are that's one of the 6 areas that I want people to design their life from the show. Like if there's a listener out there and you don't have a, spiritual life, you don't have a faith life, find different ways. He's saying this rugby team from Fiji that's helping them. And my goal in life is that every person wakes up and they're encouraged. They have hope. They have love. They're like, I'm glad I'm alive. Like, what would you say your purpose for life is, Simon? What you personally?
Yeah, when I wake up in the morning, I think my reason for being on the planet is to help other people to achieve their potential. That's something I really can give to the world. That's part of the impact that I know I can make. And I've often described it as throwing pebbles in a pond. And when you
Yep.
throw a pebble in a pond, the ripples sort of make their way outwards. And if I can impact one person that can then impact on somebody else, who can then impact on somebody else, actually the value of what I can provide to the world ends up magnifying. So my job, as I see it, is to impact as many people as I can, positively impact them, but so that they can have a positive impact on others.
Well, we have the same. We're 100% aligned because I gotta send you. I'll send you the first episode of our docuseries will be coming out next year because that's the message
Mm,
in mentorship and brotherhood and character, that when you know you're amazing, when you know that you matter, and then you help somebody else know that they matter and that they're amazing, that they're a gift, it's endless.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
that's what you're saying. That's the same thing you're saying, and I love you. I can see that you're a brilliant guy, even though you wouldn't talk about your brilliance, but because you know that wouldn't be you. But you've had over 25 years of experience in consulting, and I know what inspires you personally. But what would you say? How has your like career evolved? What would be different now than when you first started of how you do things?
yeah. It's a good question. When I first emerged out of university, I did what lots of people would do. I expected that if I went to apply what I'd learned in the classroom, it would work. And of course, it sort of does and sort of doesn't. Some of it works for some of the people. So very quickly, I had to find methods that could help everybody. I went straight into working with elite athletes, and the world of elite sport is, in a sense, pretty ruthless. If you're out there and you're claiming to make a difference and you're not making a difference, your career is going to be pretty short.
Yes.
So I had to find things that worked almost immediately. And in the world of sports psychology, essentially that means helping people focus, manage and control their own confidence, and really master their own motivation. Be able to get into what I call their discomfort zones and embrace being in their discomfort zone. Start to release what I call our mental handbrake. The thing that often people have got a mental and emotional handbrake, I think, and it stops them from really giving all of themselves, usually because they're a bit concerned or even fearful about what others might think. So really release the handbrake, be all of yourself, and to start performing in what most people would call high pressure situations. And in elite sport, there are lots of situations that people would call pressure cooker or high pressure situations. So I had to learn that very, very quickly. And probably the first 5-10 years of my working journey, that's what I focused on. I also realized very early on that what I call sports psychology isn't really sports psychology. It's really human psychology. And that if it works for an athlete, it would equally work for a salesperson, a teacher, a surgeon, a lawyer. It could work
Yeah,
for.
give me an example of something.
So controlling our confidence, for example. I learned in sport that if our confidence hangs on the result, it's outside of our control. We don't control whether we win or lose today. Referees, umpires, sometimes they decide. Sometimes it's the bounce of a ball. And sometimes it's just that the opposition's better. You know, in I worked in the Olympic programs. Quite a lot of my work was with swimmers. There's a simple truth in swimming: if you swim faster than everybody else today, you're going to win. If somebody else swims quicker, they're going to win. That's it. And if we hang our self-worth, our confidence, our emotions on winning and losing, then we hand over the remote control, as I describe it. Now, results are one thing that people use. A lot of people also use other people's feedback to rule their confidence. So if somebody says something nice, I'll feel good about myself. If they don't, I probably won't feel good about myself. Again, we just handed over the remote for our confidence to somebody else. So taking back the remote control works for athletes, but it doesn't just work for athletes. That's important for everybody, whatever we do for a living. Even if we don't have a profession, it works for kids as well. So So that's a fundamental understanding that's linked to human psychology, not sport.
And what are the traits of a confident person that you've seen? What's the difference? Like this, if you have confidence in your sport, like what you deem as confidence, Simon, like what are the traits, the specific traits they have?
Well, one of the myths is that a confident person is the one who makes the most noise, or shouts the loudest, or pumps their chest, or whatever it is. That's not confidence, not real confidence. It's usually bravado, not confidence. Um, a lot of confidence is quiet and self-assured. People don't need to show that they're confident if they truly feel confident. It's not arrogance either. Um, and and actually, when I look at players who are confident, they trust themselves. So they stick to their game plan. They do what they've been doing in training. They trust themselves. They don't panic and throw the game plan out of the window when they hit the first sign of trouble. So that's what I tend to see in confident people. And they understand that probably things won't go to plan, because on most occasions things don't go to plan. And so their confidence isn't just that they can go out and execute their game plan, it's that they can overcome all of the little challenges along the way.
So for me, confidence, I see it as they want others to be greater than them, provided they do their very, very, very best. And do you see that provides confidence when you want the teammates to do better, or provided of course you're doing your very best. You know,
Yeah.
do you see that a lot of the confident players are more about the team than about me?
Yeah, and I think you're right. There's always that sort of balance between making sure I do my job, because if I do my job properly and everybody else is doing their job, then we're going to do okay. But equally, it's teamwork is about really watching and listening to those around you, so that you can make sure that what you do complements them.
Yeah, and in your book, How Great Teams Work, what would be in that book in particular, How Great Teams Work? And this goes for a family. If you're a dad right now or you're a mom listening, look, this goes for you. If you're a business leader, a CEO, or you manage a team, whether it's at Burger King or whether it's at Facebook or wherever it is, how great teams work. What is your I know you shared about, of course, the why. That probably is a
Yeah.
part of it, the purpose. What are other areas that you discuss in your book that help make great teams?
So I spent some time working with and studying a Formula One pit crew, and the pit crew.
That has to be interesting.
It's
Those are
very,
some
very interesting.
those are some interesting characters, those Formula One guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you look at the headlines, this team changes four wheels on a car in approximately 2.5 seconds. That's it. When I was working with them, that was a good average, but they
Wow.
weren't going to celebrate a 2.5 second or 2.7 second change. That was just okay. But a 3 second change was a disaster. So you've
Wow.
got half a second's
Point,
margin for error.
0.3 second difference. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was interested not only to know how they change all four wheels on the car, but how they coordinate the efforts of 17 people to change all four wheels on a car in about 2.5 seconds. And when I dig under the skin, there are some really, really simple doesn't mean easy. This isn't easy, but some very simple things that allow that team to work. First of all, they've all got a really simple, clear role. But they also understand how all of the roles are like jigsaw pieces that fit in with each other. So I understand what I need to do, so that if I do my job well, you can do your job well. So if I do my job well, you do your job well, then somebody else can do their job. And we understand how this jigsaw piece all fits together, and how everybody's role is incredibly important. Every one of them matters. Every one of those roles is critical. They're not the same role, but every single one of them matters. And that if I then understand how I fit in, how I contribute, and how my job underpins your job, I'm not thinking about whether something's important to me. It's important to us. I'm not thinking about my agenda or your agenda. I'm thinking about our agenda, what we're all trying to achieve, and how I fit into that, and how I can help you to perform your job. That's when a team starts to work really well. When we understand, I call that the chain of interdependency. We all relying on each other. So if we understand how that looks and how we rely on each other, we also understand why everybody's job matters. And this this gives everybody an understanding that they are both valued and valuable. So valued is the way that we feel when we get a pat on the back and a thank you and all that sort of stuff. But valuable is how we feel when we know why our little piece matters, why we are important, why our contribution's important. And those two things in combination are really, really important.
Has anybody ever gotten 2.5 seconds?
Oh yeah, they regularly hit 2.5 seconds. I
Okay.
think they're now trying to consistently get under 2 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Wow.
some teams have hit the sort of 1.9, 1.8 second.
And it's the same thing they're doing every time, right? So
Yeah.
what changes it like to get 2.6, you know?
Well, so there's two bits. Everybody has to perform their own role really well, and if you make a mistake in your role, then that can cost the team time.
Yep.
But the biggest time is lost between people because we're not really coordinated. Because I'm not watching you, and therefore, when you finished your bit, I don't start mine immediately. So there's little delays between people because we're not really attending to what each other's doing, not really interested and cued into what each other's doing. And most of the time that we can save is between people and getting the team to work better together.
And what are the challenges that you see in teamwork? Like, what are the greatest challenges? I always call it ego. Ken Blanchard, who's one of my
Mm-hmm.
mentors, says ego is for him. He says edging God out. Ego is exalting God only. Like that's what he says. Ego is. And the reason he says that is it's not ego can't be about you. It has to be something outside of you. And I would take a stab at it, but I'm interested in your thoughts. Like, what do you think really breaks down team? Or what becomes just the challenge, like the grueling challenge of being on a team? And what makes you say, hey, we gotta like communicate and say this person isn't best for the team because of A, B, and C.
Yeah. The really great teams, in my view, work together. Most teams don't. Most teams
Most
work
teams
alongside.
don't.
Yeah, most teams, the people are working alongside each other, not together.
And what's the difference?
So you take an office, a standard office,
Yep.
where people walk through the same front door. They might even wear the same uniforms. They sit in the same space. If you look at their email addresses, they've probably got the same ending to their email addresses, all that
Yep.
sort of stuff. But are they working together? Or are they simply sitting next to each other and doing their own thing? In most cases, they're sitting next to each other doing their own thing. So they're working alongside each other. They're not genuinely working together. They're not trying to solve the same problems. They're not contributing to the same solutions. So they're not really working together. In some cases, people are actually working against each other. Sometimes they don't realize they're working against each other.
Yeah, why do you think people do that from your long experience? Why do people work against each other? That doesn't make sense if you all want to achieve a goal to have a job and have a career. And because if one guy succeeds, then everybody succeeds. If the other guy succeeds, then everybody, succeeds. So what's that about? Is that just human nature or what?
Well, I think most people that work against each other don't realize they are. They're doing it
Okay.
unintentionally. So there's an exercise that I do, usually with sort of conference rooms of people.
Yep.
And I'll ask them, and usually a conference room doesn't have many windows. So
Yeah.
I'll ask them, stand up and face in the direction that you think is north. And of course, everybody stands up and we've got people facing everywhere,
Yeah.
usually 360 degrees. And then I
Yeah.
say, what would happen if we said to everybody, walk 100 meters in the direction that you're currently facing? How far apart would we be at the end of that? What if we walked for an hour in that direction? How far apart would we be at the end of an hour? And people start to get the understanding they'd be a long way from each other.
Yep.
And yet, as an organization, we said our direction was north. Folks, we're all going in the same direction. We're going north. And yet everybody's walked off in different directions. Because what we haven't done is told people how to walk north. We haven't given them the tools, the map, the compass, and everything else. So actually, if we look at where the energy goes in different directions. One person's walking in completely the opposite direction. And in a business organization, when I talk about what that actually means, we don't walk a distance in a business, but there's a passage of time. And over that time, we make choices and decisions. Sometimes the choices and decisions might take us in the same direction. Maybe they don't. And maybe that's because I've got a set of objectives that I'm trying to hit, and you've got a set of objectives that you're trying to hit, and somebody else has got another set of objectives. And because we're all focused on hitting our own objectives, actually we're not aligned at all. Yours are taking you southeast, mine are taking me northwest, and yours are taking you southwest. And therefore nobody's really walking north at all. And that's why unintentionally, and you see it all the time, there's a tug of war between my budget and your budget, or my objectives and your objectives, or my business plan and your business plan. And actually within the organization, the energy is going on in a lot of different directions. Now, in some cases, people are working against each other, usually through fear that I will lose my spot on the team or whatever it happens to be. I've seen a sports team, a soccer team, where some of the senior players were trying to undermine the younger players, because if the younger players played too well, they'd get in the team and the older players would lose their shirt. So actually they were trying to pull others back and stop them performing. I've seen a quote unquote sales team who were stealing business from each other because they wanted to hit their target. And if you kind of drill down deep enough, it's usually fear, it's insecurity that's sort of underpinning all of that. And actually, if I look at ego usually starts to become an issue because people feel insecure. It's usually through fear.
Yeah, so what you're saying is the first one is process and procedure. Like you need the first one you're talking about where they're unsure, they're not clear about the objectives and where we're going and how we're going to get there. And we need to communicate and articulate about that. And that can be handled. But I think that people, the second one is the graver challenge, because it's passive aggressive, that big PA word, passive aggressive is the only thing that you can't defeat. It's really very hard to defeat within a team environment because people aren't holding their cards out there, though they know what their cards are. And so it comes with fear and insecurity. So my first question is, how do you defeat people's fears? For us in our environment, we use vulnerability. Like when you can have the leader be vulnerable and say, hey, I'm afraid, and this is what I'm afraid. This is what. Now, other people say that's dumb because then you're giving them the cards. You know what I mean? Like, but for you, how do you identify a team's fears? What is something you would do if there were 4 or 5 team members of living in a fear-based way or an insecure way? How are you able to bring that team together? What would you do to bring them together?
So I think you're right. Vulnerability is really powerful. Not everybody's willing to do it. And again, if you dig under the surface, when we feel more secure in ourselves, we're happier to be vulnerable. That's a compounding cycle. And the more vulnerable we are, probably the less fear we have, and that perpetuates.
How's it going? It's Justin Fatica, and I can tell you I'm so thankful for your encouraging messages and engagement and joining us for our videos that we hope are bringing you encouragement when you need it most. Now, before you go, I want to tell you about some exciting news. Since I was 19 years old, it's my dream to build facilities for kids. Well, that dream is happening. It's a place where young people and their families can relax, socialize, work out, be encouraged, that they can make a difference in somebody's life every day or have their lives be impacted. That's where we need you. We need you to ask yourself if you'd like to help us to break ground. You can be a part of this mission within less than 1 year. But if we don't have help, we can't do this. Now, I know right now there are a lot of people struggling, but we're just looking for pocket change, a rainy day fund, or to connect us with partners who can help make this dream a reality. We want every single kid and every single family to know they're amazing. And it starts with you. Please like, share, and subscribe to our content so we can keep you updated, so you can keep us going. And together, remember, we are making a lasting impact. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for your support, and stay encouraged. And never forget, you were made for an amazing day, and it starts with what lives within you. You're amazing.
But when I look at why some teams are able to play with freedom and a lack of fear, and other teams seem to be constrained by fear, our ability to make mistakes is critical. We have to be able to make mistakes. And in lots of environments, whether it's elite sport, whether it's corporate culture, we've taken out the margin for error. We've told people that they can't make any mistakes. Our targets are so high. One of those things I've noticed about lean thinking in business is lean thinking's there to take out the fat, take out the margin for error. And in doing so, of course, we also start to eradicate the possibility of making mistakes. We take out all of that space that we need to experiment in. And if we do that, of course, people are then petrified that they'll make a mistake. And if they do make a mistake, they want to cover it up immediately. They're not going to learn from it. What they want to do is they want to throw up the smoke screens. They want to divert everybody away from that so that, if we've made a mistake, everybody's looking in the opposite direction so they don't spot it. And that's a culture that can quickly become very corrosive.
Yeah. So I think that's leadership. Leadership is the way that we're going to be able to have a team be able to get through those hurdles and get through those challenges. So who are some of the best coaches or leaders or CEOs you've worked with, and what do they all have in common?
One of them was a former Special Forces leader. He was an SAS major in the Special Air Service. He actually described vulnerability as his greatest strength.
Wow. Okay.
And I find that really interesting coming from a Special Forces leader.
Yeah, no, for sure. It'd be like, you think that's the antithesis of leadership.
Yeah. And in that environment where you think it's all macho, alpha, he was literally saying on 2 counts, when I'm vulnerable, it really helps me to be a better leader. And when I talked to him about this, he said, if somebody screwed up, and it could be quite, in their world, if you screw up, it could be a life and death thing.
It's devastating.
But if somebody screwed up, rather than pointing fingers at them, he would say, I know this is a big screw up, but I've made bigger ones. Let me tell you about one of mine. And he said, immediately you disarm the situation and you're not judging them now. They don't feel judged. They know that you've made screw ups too. You're a human being. They're a human being. And he says, and if I could offer you some experience, maybe I'd offer you this, or, do you want to learn from this? I've got some stuff that might help you. That I've seen some things that might help you. And the learning, therefore, is likely to elevate hugely. So that was one way he described it. But also, as leaders, if we feel fearful, we can start to overcome that by embracing our vulnerability. And therefore, we're probably happier operating in uncertainty, operating outside of our comfort zone. We're probably going to function better, be better leaders in that environment as well. One of those little phrases that I picked up many, many years ago, it's from a Star Wars movie. Master Yoda saying, you have to let go of all that you fear to lose. And I think it's when we start embracing vulnerability, we also let go of what we fear to lose. So that was a huge lesson from me.
I agree that, when my kids miss a winning shot in a game, which they have many times, or they lose a game and get blown out, I take them for ice cream. Right? And I'm like, hey, they're like, Dad, but you don't take us for ice cream when we win. I go, you already got your ice cream.
When I was in the US a few weeks ago with the Fiji rugby team, we were at the Nike campus in Oregon, in Portland.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And we were working in a building, the LeBron James building, which, as you can imagine, is dedicated to LeBron James and inspired by him. In the entranceway, there's a basketball hoop with a gold ring on it. And on the floor, there are little spots. So a little black circle for the shots that he missed and a gold circle for the shots that he scored. Now, right underneath the basket, as you can imagine, there's quite a lot of gold. Yeah. The further out you go from the basket, of course, there's less gold and more black spots. And we stood the players round, explained this to them and said, well, what do you think? What do you notice? And they said, there's a lot of black on the floor. Yeah. And this is LeBron James, one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of black on the floor. And if we understand this in a slightly wider context, these are competition shots. And in competition, you probably don't experiment quite as much because you want a higher success ratio. So imagine what it would have looked like in training. What would that floor have looked like when you're experimenting and you're pushing yourself? One of the things I've learned from really great athletes is they're worried when they've stopped making mistakes, because it means they're not pushing hard enough. They're not testing themselves enough.
I love that. That's tremendous.
And one of the things I think we can do to encourage people is to just help them reflect on that actually the mistakes are usually a sign that you're outside of your comfort zone. That's a good thing. That's a really good thing, because that's where we grow.
I love you, Simon. I love you, man. This guy, you're like the biggest encourager around. You're like top 10 encouragers I've had on, honestly. No, because Simon, that's my belief system. The more you can fail with joy and peace and patience, right? And kindness, right? The more you can help others succeed, and the more you're going to succeed down the road. Especially in any line of work. Look at family life, look at businesses, look at athletic work. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I don't want to admit this. I'll tell you a sneak peek at our docu-series that, we got all kinds of people looking at. But what we're teaching the world, because my team doesn't win all the games.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of the docu-series. That, wait a second, these guys are losing, but they're learning so much.
There you go.
And the whole point is, like, we don't want this to become, like the Miracle on Ice show. You know what I mean? Like, we love the Miracle on Ice, when we beat the big Russians, the big bad Russians. And but we want it to be about mentorship, that even when you lose, you're still being mentored and there's growth in your life and you become a better person. I think encouragement is about being able to lose well.
Yeah.
And any of the great leaders, use LeBron James, use, Mahatma Gandhi, use Martin Luther King, any of your UK leaders. Who's one UK leader that I might not know about, that you love in your country, that America might not know about, that's lost well, but really did so much good for the UK?
If we look at some of the business leaders, Richard Branson's quite a famous business leader in the UK, set up the Virgin Group, so Virgin Airlines, Virgin Atlantic, and many others. And I've often reflected on, there are obviously some successes in there, like the Virgin Airline, and he's trying to create a space program, all that sort of stuff. But actually, if you look at the failures, and he's really public about this, there's loads of them. There's loads of them, and what I really like about him is he's very open about that. Very open to say, you're not going to see success after success after success in my journey. What you're going to see is a lot of experimentation, some successes, a lot of failures too. And even recently, so it's not that he's got to an age where he knows it all now, and he still pushes himself. Still tries things that nobody else has tried things that he's never tried. And he's in his 70s now.
In the UK, and I'm just generalizing, so don't take this as, but they sometimes wouldn't say that the culture is very vulnerable as a culture. Would you agree with that? Or is that just I know it's a generalization, but like, even in America, sometimes we're like, hey, we hold our cards, we're control, we're not going to share. And they could even say we're not vulnerable. So both of our countries kind of have that spirit of lack of vulnerability. How do we get our country and our leadership and our young people to become vulnerable in a way that's healthy? Like, how do you teach vulnerability?
One of the things that I think we're starting to appreciate is that it's valuable. I think once upon a time, in the not too distant past, probably if you'd have asked people to do word association, vulnerability and weakness would have gone together.
Yes, yeah.
Now, I think more people are realizing that vulnerability is strength. And to be vulnerable requires courage. So actually, it's courageous to be vulnerable. and it's an act of strength, not weakness. And therefore, when we start to understand that it's valuable and we value it, then we'll probably embrace more of it.
So for you, Simon, what was one of the greatest challenges that you endured in your life, and how did it help you?
So I've taken on some really ridiculous challenges in my time. Um,
All
so
right, ridiculous. Simon's ridiculous here. All right.
Oh, 100% ridiculous. Yeah. So one of them was a 40-day challenge, which was some kayaking and cycling and running around the UK. One of them was a 100-mile walk in 24 hours, some proper ridiculous and brutal stuff. I'm not going to recommend it to anyone. It hurts. I mean, it's painful stuff. But the biggest challenge I've ever taken on was to write a fictional book. So I'd written I think 8, 9 non-fiction books when I attempted to write my first fictional book, and it took me 7 years. It took me 12 full drafts. The first draft I wrote, I sort of edited it again. So I got it into a second draft where I thought it was pretty good. I sent it to an editor and I got some feedback. The opening line of his email back to me, the subject line said, "Book feedback, brackets, brace yourself." And it started with him saying, I'll begin with the good news. You technically have a story because it's got a start, middle, and end, but that's where the good news finishes. And then he laid into me with critical feedback.
Yeah, I've been there too. I've been there.
Generously, I would have given it probably a 1, maybe a 2 out of 10 if I was being hyper generous, but that's all it was. And I quickly came to the conclusion that I was not a fictional writer. I never had been. It's not something I've really messed around with since I was at school. So I went back to the drawing board, and it eventually took me 7 years to complete, 12 full edits. I went through sort of heartache after heartache, soul search after soul search, where I thought it was pretty good, gave it to people, got some feedback, turned out it was still rubbish. Went through the whole thing dozens of times, and eventually published it a couple of years ago. And that's, I think, still my toughest ever challenge, because the emotional roller coaster that you go on as part of that journey is like nothing else. I mean, I've been through physical discomfort, but this was probably greater on many levels.
And what helped you through that? Like what helped you through that challenge?
Two things, actually. So one, that it was important. I wasn't writing fiction just because I wanted to become a fictional author. I was writing a book which was designed to help particularly teenagers with the mental and emotional challenges of life. And I figured that if I wrote it into a non-fiction book, it would be dry and boring and nobody would read it. So I was sort of thinking about writing a fictional book that contained all of the psychology and philosophy that I knew was going to be helpful. And it was my version of almost making a Harry Potter style story, something that you could learn from as well, and that after reading it you'd be better dealing with your own mental and emotional challenges. So that's why I wrote it. And at each stage where I was thinking, oh, should I just give up on this, I went back to the question, is that still important? Do teenagers still need help with this stuff? Yes. In that case, dust yourself off, kid, get back on the horse and go again. And so that was one. The other thing that I reflected on as I was going through it is that I've taken on plenty of nutty challenges in my time, and eventually I find a way through. Not quickly, often. Maybe it's not pretty either. I'm a great believer. I've spoken to a lot of people about their journey from sort of wherever they started to world class in their field. And there's always a bit in the middle that they describe as the messy middle. And I was thinking, they found their way through. I found my way through challenges. Eventually, I learned my way through it. If I just keep going at this, I'm likely to get there. I don't know how long it'll take. I don't know how many drafts I'll have to do. But logically, if I keep going at it and keep learning and developing and adapting, I'll get there eventually. So those two things in combination, I think, probably helped me through that journey.
And do you have family?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Okay, so how many children do you have?
I've got 2 teenage daughters.
Oh, two. Oh, man, I have a teenage daughter. How's that going? Is that a challenge?
Yeah. And largely because they're polar opposites, like most kids.
Yeah, like most kids.
So
Yeah,
you think you've figured out how to parent one of them, and the other one's the complete opposite.
totally different. Isn't that wild how that happens? Like I
Mm.
have 5 kids, and they're all yep, 5 children. They're all different.
Yeah,
Every one of them. They're so different. You
yeah.
know, one's going to play collegiate basketball. He's 18, and then I have a 6-year-old. So it's 18 to 6, and they're all
Yeah.
they're a lot of fun. But my greatest challenge is like being vulnerable with them. You know, I
Mm.
remember one of my children came to me and he said, he's a good shooter even when he's younger. He said, "Hey, Dad, I get picked on." Because we actually homeschool our kids. I don't know if
Okay.
do they have homeschool in the UK?
They do. I mean, ours aren't, but yeah, it is a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. But so we homeschool our kids, and if you're good at athletics and you're homeschooled, that can sometimes be a problem,
Mm.
because they're like kids. The school kids don't like. What do you mean? How did he get good in basketball?
Yeah.
So he was really young. He's getting picked on. When he started tearing up a little bit because he was like young, early age, and I started tearing up.
Yeah.
And he goes, "What are you crying about, Dad?" And I said, "I've been picked on too."
Mm.
And for the little guy, he was like, "I'm like a Superman."
Yeah.
He couldn't believe that his dad got picked on. I go, "But you know what? It helped me to love others a lot more. It helped me to be a better person."
Mm.
And so for you with your kids, like I just want to say, I just see such joy in you, such hope in you, such encouragement in you, Simon. Just your spirit, just the way about you. I'm sure that you've had times where your daughters were discouraged. How are you able to take some of the tools that you've used? How have you been able to take those tools? I know we try to use our tools with our kids and they don't work as well as we'd like, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But what have you seen work being a family man? What have you seen work for you?
Well, I've done a heck of a lot that hasn't worked.
Me too. Me too.
um, I, I I think probably whenever I've made mistakes on this one, it's to try and impart my experience onto them, hoping that my experience will help them. Most of the time when it's worked, I might have shared a little bit to let them know that I've been there too, or have been in a similar position too. But it's really trying to help them with their experience rather than with mine. And sometimes I also know that I'm the wrong person to help,
Yeah,
honestly.
for sure.
And actually, the best thing that we can do is find somebody who they can relate to. Because, I think one of the ironies is I can help a lot of people. Probably the people closest to me are the ones that are most difficult for me to
Yeah.
help. And, when my eldest used to play sport, used to play cricket competitively. And somebody once asked me, we were talking about how she, like many others, gets nervous. And they said, "Well, you're a sports psych. I mean, this is what you do, right?" I said, "But not to her. I'm a dad. I'm not her sports psych. That's not the agreement we have with each other. She doesn't want me to be her sports psych or her coach or anything like that. She wants me to be dad."
Yeah.
So and I said, unless we've got that understanding, that almost contract between us, that that's what I'm going to do for her and I'm happy doing it and she wants me to do it, unless we've got that, I'm not that for her. And if she
Yeah.
needs that, we've got to go and find her one,
Yeah.
for
That's
it
an
to work.
interesting concept, Simon, because on this, we want people to design their life, right? In those 6 areas. And we had one guest on, which I actually agree with him. He said that you should have a mentor or a coach, a different one for each way that you're designing life, because they're going to be able to help you. So, you don't want like the faith person to be your financial coach, you know what I mean? And you don't want, the family person to maybe be your mental coach. You want to find leaders. Would you agree with that concept?
I find that I tend to have a group of people around me. And as you said, I sort of tap into them for different things. Um, there are a lot of challenges that I've been through in life where people will ask me, "Have you got somebody to talk to?" And my answer is I've got quite a few people, and I tend not to have huge, deep conversations with one person. I tend to have lots of conversations with different people on different topics, ones that they're comfortable and I'm
Yep.
confident, and it's ones that those conversations flow naturally with those people. And it's probably not even quite as clear cut as one for financial and one for spiritual and one. It's just a group of people around me
Yeah,
that,
that you trust.
yeah, yeah, and whose opinions, I'm really keen to seek, whose experience I'm keen to sort of tap into. And I'm also a huge a believer that if we learn with each other, share our solutions, share what's worked, share what hasn't worked, offer us, each other different perspectives on things, usually we can solve most of the stuff that's in front of us.
For sure. And for you looking ahead, like what are your future goals and aspirations? I know you're writing a motivational book. What's the difference between I'd like one question, what's the difference between motivation and psychology? Is there a difference? I always wonder that 'cause a lot of psychologists say motivation is, not worth anything. Other psychologists will say it's important. How do you plan to continue this impact? You're making such a positive impact on teams worldwide. Where are you headed there, Simon?
My journey has always been to follow my passion, follow my curiosity, and essentially see where it takes me. But along the way, share the insights I've learned with others, particularly if they're valuable insights that I know have helped me or helped the people I'm working with, share those as widely as I can. And so that's been the journey to get here. It'll be the path into the future as well. And I don't always know what's along that path, because if you follow your curiosity, you never know what you're going to uncover. It keeps life really interesting. And
So interesting. I'm the same way. I'm like, people are like, where are you headed? I go, I wouldn't have thought I'd be doing some of the things I'm doing now. I can't believe it. But and other things I thought I'd be doing other things, and I'm not doing those things. So
yeah,
that I like that. I like the curiosity. But what's this motivational book about? Like, what are you really looking to get out of it? Because a lot of people in the sports psychology would say motivation is of least importance.
yeah. And the book about motivation, it's called Motivation is Pear Shaped. And it's just a little insight that I came stumbled across. So I'd asked a lot of people, why do you come here and do this stuff with us, particularly in workplaces? Not why do you come to work, because the headline answer there is, I need to get paid, and we've got
Yeah.
kids to feed and a roof to keep over our heads and all that sort of stuff. But why specifically this job? Why here? And when I delve that little bit deeper and ask that question, I've noticed over the years, because I've asked this question thousands of times, that all of the answers fall into four categories. They're either related to passion. So some people will say it's to make a difference. We have a positive impact on the world, society, other people, we change lives, all of those sorts of things. So for some people, it's about the purpose. For some people, they'll say, I love what I do, or I love the team I work with, or we've got a great environment here. Sometimes I like the challenges that we take on, maybe not the tasks, but I like the fact that it's not easy, it's stimulating. So there's an enjoyment element of it. So purpose is the first, enjoyment is the second. For some, it's about achievement and ambition. It's about recognizing that we're getting better. We're good at this stuff. We might even be the best at what we do. Some people they love working with organizations who are recognized as the best in their field. And for some, they just want to know that they're progressing and improving. But there's an element of that that's about achievement, ambition. Maybe it's goal setting, goal hitting, that's important to them. So that's the A. And the R of pair is recognition and reward. So sometimes it's basic dollars and cents, pounds, shillings, and pence stuff where I get paid for this. Sometimes we get paid really well, but sometimes we don't. I mean, in the UK, nurses are not paid very well, and they don't do it for the money. Teachers don't do what they do for the money. They need to get paid, sure, but that's not the reason that they do it. Um, it might be recognition. It might be awards that they get. It might be a simple pat on the back, a thank you, appreciation. So all of the answers I've heard fall into those four categories. It's purpose, enjoyment, achievement and ambition, recognition and reward. And when I understand that, I then understand how to notice people who are motivated by different things, and be able to help motivate them by plugging into that. So if I know that they're achievement orientated, I've got a better chance of motivating them. If I understand that. Equally, if we're building an environment and we want to motivate everybody, we build these 4 elements into our environment. We make sure that if people are motivated by a sense of purpose, we've got that here. It's not just about chasing the bottom line. We understand why we do what we do and why it's important, why it matters, why we care about this. We can also build that sense of fun, create that environment that we want to, make sure that we've got a great team, we've got great leadership, we take on great challenges, that we can give people a sense of achievement with it as well, that they don't just do jobs and tick off a things to-do list. They can actually understand that they're making progress and that we as an organization are getting better, and that we can recognize and reward people. If we do that on a regular basis, there's not a lot else we need to do within the environment. We can create a motivational environment, one where people are really proud to belong. And if we've got that, we've got something that's super motivating.
So I'm going to tell everybody about the pair. I just wrote it down. I'm going to tell everybody about it because, what I believe, everybody when they walk in the room, they should feel loved, know they're loved, and have a sense of belonging. And I just want to thank you, Simon, because you brought what I want to bring my teams, that I coach, and the businesses, the church groups, the youth that I speak to. I want them to know that they belong, whether it's for an hour and a half or whether it's for a 3-day experience. And Simon, you live that out. Let me tell you something. You live that out. If I ever met somebody, in America like you, I'll tell you what, I'd give them a big hug, and I hope to give you a big hug one day and encourage you. The Italians, encourage the UK because you're doing a great job. And it's just so great that what this podcast has done for me is it's just really given me hope. I meet a lot of kids and parents that they've had children die or their dad die, or I've met a lot of kids that want to give up on life, and even parents that want to give up on life. In my speakings of millions of people that I've spoken to, I meet so many people that are discouraged.
Yeah.
And I started this podcast to get people on that could bring a sense of encouragement when times are tough. And that's what you did today. This is the purpose and the reason for this podcast, the Encouragement Conquers All podcast. And I just thank you for coming on and bringing a belonging. And if anybody ever says, what's that Simon Hartley guy about? I'm like, oh man, he made me feel and know I belong. So thank you, Simon.
You're very welcome. And when you're over in Europe, we'll make sure we grab a pizza together.
All right. Oh, great. I'm not getting a pizza in Italy, not in the UK. I'm gonna get whatever. So what do you get? A burger? What do you got over there? What's your?
No, well, if you're in England, you have to eat roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, fish and chips.
Oh, I love Yorkshire. My grandmother, even though she wasn't totally from the UK, she loved Yorkshire pudding. I'll tell you what. So. When I come to the UK, I will call you up. I promise. And if you're ever in America, I'll fly out and meet up with you. I would.
Done deal. Brilliant.
All right, great. Brilliant. You're amazing. That's what brilliant means. When I went to Ireland, they loved, you're amazing. You're amazing. I tell everybody that. So keep it up, Simon. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Encouragement Conquers All podcast with Justin Fatica. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this episode with someone who needs a little encouragement. For more uplifting content, follow us on our social media pages. See you in the next episode.